Hey CAD1, this is Mr. Williams, and what I'm going to show you today is basically how to start your truss design in Inventor. To this point, you guys should have done some research, done some sketches, figured out roughly what your design is going to be for your second bridge. And what I'm going to do is show you what you need to do in order to actually model that bridge in Inventor. You can see here I just have a new standard IPT started. It's just English, it doesn't have to be metric or anything like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by sketching on the standard XY plane. Once I have that started, one of the first things that you're going to want to do is to establish the perimeter shape of your bridge. Keep in mind that because this is going to be a 3D part, the entire bridge is just going to be a part. You have to actually create more than just a single line. Most likely your sketches were just single lines that represent the different trusses and members of your truss. And what this is going to be a double line to represent the thickness of the actual balsa wood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by sketching a basic shape for your bridge. Now if you guys remember your criteria, your bridge has to be 10 inches long. So to start off with, the bottom of my bridge is going to be straight across, so I'll make a line that's 10 inches. My computer's a little bit laggy because I'm recording this. I'm going to make an angled piece. Actually, you know what, I'll just make it straight up. I'll just make this one relatively generic. So I'll start with a box, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to add dimensions so that I can make this box the perimeter size of my bridge the size that I want. So I'm going to add another dimension. That dimensions the height, and let's say I want it to be 3 inches. So I type in 3. Now what I have to do here is I can't, obviously you guys know I could extrude this, but it would just be a solid rectangle. What I want to do is I only want to extrude an 1/8 of an inch thickness of this because that's the size balsa wood that you're working with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a command that you haven't used yet. It's called offset. And that command's right up here, and if you click on this, since this is a closed shape right now, whenever I select one of these, if I click and drag this way, you can see it'll offset inward. I could also offset outward, but we've already established that my bridge is 10 inches long, so I want to only go inward. And I can click that, and then you can add a dimension using, I just used the D key, but you can click on this and click between these two lines, click this line and this line, add that dimension, and make that an 1/8 of an inch, which the decimal equivalent is 0.125, or you can type in 1/8 for 1/8, and it'll do the conversion for you. You can see right there. But what that does is now if I were to finish my sketch, whenever I go to extrude that shape, it'll only extrude, well I can only extrude that rectangle there that would be represented by the balsa wood, and obviously the balsa wood is 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch. So again, I would extrude this 1/8 of an inch, and you could see this would be as if I actually had a balsa wood rectangle that is 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch. I'm actually going to go back into that extrusion by right-clicking and edit, actually back into the sketch, right-clicking and clicking Edit Sketch. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add the bracing that I have designed for this inside unit here. What I recommend for that is to actually use construction lines. If you guys remember that from a couple of the other projects, all you have to do is click on construction, and then I'm going to click on line. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by establishing the center of my bridge. And what that does is it makes my life a lot easier because I'm only going to model half of this, and then I'm going to mirror it over. I should say I'm only going to sketch half of it and mirror it over. And what this particular design is going to be, it's going to be basic. It's just going to be some X's. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another vertical line here, and I'm going to add a dimension from here to here. From the center to this edge, it'll say that it's a driven dimension. That's okay. I'm just using it for reference. And then I'm going to make this dimension half of that. And another thing I've been showing you, one thing that makes this a lot easier is obviously half of 5 is 2.5. but in case this was a more complex dimension, you could just click on this dimension, and then using the keypad on your keyboard, type in the /, which is divided by 2, which would be half of this, and it'll reference that and make it half of whatever that dimension is. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add construction lines from corner to corner, add them here to here, so that I make these X's that I discussed before. Now my next step is I'm going to, what this does is it establishes the center of those pieces. This would be similar to the sketches that you and your partner made. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the construction toggle, and now whenever I use the offset command, what's neat about this, as long as the construction toggle is off, whenever I offset these, I can click and drag, and it'll actually make the green geometry rather than creating the construction geometry there. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to offset one on either side of this, and the reason for that is because this would represent the center of the piece of balsa wood. So I need to offset this way and this way so that it represents the outer sides of the balsa wood, and that'll make a little bit more sense here in a second. So I'm just going to do this to each one of these pieces. You see some of these pieces are going to overlap, be too long, maybe too short, but we'll fix that up here in a minute. And I'm just going to offset this one on this side, because remember, we're only doing half. Now what I'm going to start doing is, since these other pieces are constrained, I'm going to start adding dimensions to this. I'm going to make this dimension 1/16, and you'll see why in a second. And I'm going to make the distance from here to here 1/8, because that's the thickness of the balsa wood. Now what I did here, again, since this is the center, the distance from the center to one side is going to be half of 1/8. You guys already know half of 1/8 is 1/16, so that's why I made that dimension, which establishes where this line will go, and then I add this dimension here to establish the thickness. And now what that does is it gives the thickness of this piece so that I can extrude it later. Now I'm just going to add those same dimensions, and again I can reference the ones I already have done to the other pieces. You could just go in and type them all again, but I'm all about efficiency, so I'm just going to do it the quick and easy way and add the dimensions this way. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Make that 0.125. And again, we're just trying to establish that this line and this line are 1/8 of an inch apart, and that they're centered on that construction line that we've already created, and that's what these dimensions are doing. Now this is the center, so this is only going to be 1/16 of an inch. Now what we're going to do here, you guys know that your finished sketch has to be a closed profile. All these lines right now are intersecting each other, and you can't have that. So what we have to do is trim away the parts that we don't need. Now this is a bit tedious, it takes a bit of time, but it's what has to happen for you to have a closed profile and actually make this thing work. So I'm just going to use my trim command, and I'm going to trim away the parts of this that I don't need. Now what's going to happen is, as you start to trim away these, since these dimensions are down here, once I trim away the interior part, it's going to separate these lines, so these will actually turn green. But that's okay, because they're already in the right location. As long as you don't accidentally click and drag or something, you should be fine. So I'm just going to trim away the parts of these lines that I don't need so that I have a closed profile. My computer's a little bit laggy, as discussed. And you have to make sure that you trim away these as well. This is what you want your corners to look like, no intersecting lines. And intersections like this, you notice that I zoom in, it just, again, it's doing little things like that just make your life a lot easier whenever you're trying to trim these things up. So as discussed, it is quite a bit of trimming, but in the end you have to have your intersections look like this. think that pretty much does it. Now what I'm going to do, once I have these things set up, I'm going to mirror these X's and these vertical lines over to this side so it's symmetrical, so it has the same exact design over on this side. As a review, I think to this point you guys have only mirrored in 3D. You can also mirror in a sketch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on mirror, and I'm only going to select the items that I want to mirror over to this side. I don't want to select this line because that's already over here. I don't want to select these lines because they are already over here. So just these lines on the inside. And if you remember, I can do a click and drag where I just click and drag and only select the items that are on the inside edge. So you can see what's highlighted right now. Just these X's and vertical lines are all that is selected. Then I click mirror line, which is that middle construction line that we established in the beginning. I click on that and hit apply. Now you can see I have the same exact design over here. The only thing left to do is to trim away the parts that were created over here, or I should say the gaps that were created whenever I mirrored. Get rid of these parts so that it's all one big closed profile. Now what I'm going to do is finish sketch, and what you're going to notice is that mine looks a little bit goofy. Because I already extruded this, the computer doesn't know exactly what to make of my extrusion, so it kind of just guesses and makes it like this. But you can always edit your extrusion. Most of you won't have to do this. Once you get done, then you'll just hit extrude and be done. But since I went back, I'll have to edit my extrusion also. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete my extrusion. And I'll uncheck my sketches because I don't want to delete that. And then whenever I extrude it again, this will be how yours is established. Notice that whenever I click on this, it's only extruding the parts that I want. If for some reason, if you go to extrude and you click on your profile and it ends up looking something like this, that would indicate that you don't have a closed profile in this area. So you'll have to go back into your sketch and double check your connections and your lines to make sure that there's no intersecting lines or lines that aren't touching. So that's one thing that you'll want to check over just in case you have that issue. But otherwise, I'm going to hit OK, and now I have my truss. In the next video, I'm going to show you guys how to go about creating the rest of your bridge, but I'm going to stop this one here.